Hi everyone, I'm Ashley Smith. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Florida in the Soil, Water, Ecosystem Sciences Department located at the Tropical Research and Education Center. I'm really excited to share with you all some of the work that we've been doing funded through the Nature Conservancy as part of our project called A Holistic Assessment of Using Shellfish Aquaculture for Water Quality Improvement Initiatives in Florida. I'm up here today sharing with you some of the results from this work, but it really was a group effort, and I'm just one member of a very large team. We have many graduate students, technicians, and additional professors and extension agents who all contributed to the work that I'm going to talk about with you today. Before we talk about using shellfish for water quality, we have to talk about water quality. Water quality can mean lots of different things, but in the context of our work, we focus on water quality as it relates to nutrient pollution. Nutrient pollution is when there are too many nutrients in a water body. Nitrogen is the main nutrient of concern in coastal systems, and when there are too many nutrients, we get algal blooms. When you get algal blooms, we have low oxygen events, fish kills, seagrass die-offs, and overall decline in ecosystem health. And this is where shellfish come in. From current data that we have, we know that shellfish filter water so that it removes particles, and in doing that, it also removes nitrogen. There's a few other things that we know about managing water quality, and they all relate to the fact that what we're doing on land is often not enough to protect coastal waters, leaving many of us to look for other solutions. I just wanted to take a moment and step through how shellfish are linked to nitrogen removal. When nitrogen enters coastal waters, it feeds that algae. That algae are grazed on by the shellfish. Some of the nitrogen that was in the algae, the shellfish then use for their own growth, and it's assimilated into their shell and tissue. What they don't use is transferred to the sediments in biodeposits or excreted. The biodeposit fraction represents juicy organic matter for sediment microbes. These microbes will use those biodeposits and can actually transform the nitrogen into inert N2 gas and send that back up to the atmosphere where we want nitrogen gas. Shellfish enhanced nitrogen removal is an important ecosystem service. Ecosystem services are benefits that nature provides to us. And a lot of times these services can have a dollar value on them. Nitrogen removal is an ecosystem service, and it can be something that you could be paid for as a payment for ecosystem services. When we talk about nitrogen, we often talk about a nutrient trading credit, which would be one payment for this service. A nutrient trading credit is something where the polluter who has too much nitrogen that they're putting into the waterways is looking for somebody who has extra credits or is removing nitrogen that they can then buy those credits from. So our project took this approach and wanted to see if it would work in Florida. The first step to our project was to figure out if Florida shellfish are removing nitrogen and just how much nitrogen they are removing. Then we conducted surveys to figure out how much the polluters, for lack of a better word, would be willing to pay for nitrogen removal credits. And then we also conducted surveys with shellfish farmers and growers to figure out how much they would need to be paid for a credit if they were just to grow shellfish exclusively for the nitrogen removal benefits. This would be what would happen in this restoration aquaculture context, where you would be culturing these organisms just for water quality restoration. Then the third prong of our study was to focus on, what does this payments for ecosystem services look like in Florida? How do shellfish fit into the nutrient trading credit programs that already exist? And then what are other opportunities for shellfish farmers to be paid for their services? We conducted our study in Cedar Key and in the Tampa Bay region. We chose these areas because they both had active leases of oysters and clams. They were located in areas where there were watershed nitrogen problems, so there could be potential buyers for these credits located in the watershed. And then they were within 6 hours of my lab in Homestead because our samples needed to get back really quick after we collected them. At each site, we went seasonally, so 2 times in Florida, and collected samples from within the aquaculture footprint or aquaculture lease, as well as areas outside of the lease to represent what would be happening for denitrification without the shellfish there. We also collected samples of the shellfish for measurements of nitrogen content in their shell and tissue. Here are the results from our denitrification rates. What you see here on the x-axis is the different sites and then the different shellfish species. So we have Southwest Florida or our Tampa Bay region and then the Big Bend region. And then we have our clams and then our oysters. Our references, so those are the areas that didn't have shellfish, that's the blue. And then the area within the shellfish farm, and this was under the shellfish, around the shellfish, or between shellfish, that is orange. And then our units are nitrogen removal and N2 production. So you don't have to worry too much about that. Just look at these bars. And what you see right away is that there are positive N2 fluxes from every site that we measured. A positive N2 flux is really great. It means that nobody in this, none of our sites were creating new nitrogen and everybody was removing nitrogen. This is work that's being led by Gabby Forsett, who is a technician in my lab. Some of the other things that I see when I look at these data were that the Southwest Florida, we really did see a bigger increase in denitrification with the shellfish present than we did in Cedar Key. And in fact, Cedar Key, we don't really see any difference between our shellfish leases and our reference leases. A few key takeaways from this for me are that there's a lot of variability overall, and I think it's going to be really difficult to come up with one specific number for how much nitrogen is removed through shellfish aquaculture and enhanced denitrification. Things like the local hydrology, the depth, the sediment type, the number of farms in the area, all could go into affecting these rates of denitrification. And what I think this also draws attention to the importance of the amount of shellfish in a waterway. And so Cedar Key just has a lot more shellfish shellfish aquaculture than the Southwest Florida region. And so a lot of the biodeposits, or what we are thinking are driving that sediment denitrification, are just already there. They don't move around, or the sediments are saturated enough already, and we weren't really outside of that footprint of aquaculture when we did our measurements. I just talked about our results from the enhanced denitrification, but that's not the only way that nitrogen is removed at shellfish farms. The other way is through assimilation into their tissue and shell, and then that physical removal or that extraction of that nitrogen during harvest. And this is work that was led by Shirley Baker, where she was able to measure the nitrogen content in the meat and tissue of different shellfish, different kinds of oysters, and also clams. We can combine these data to figure out how much nitrogen is removed per shellfish farm per year. To do this, we take that and the denitrification enhancement, or the increase in denitrification relative to the background, and then scale that based on a year and the area of the lease. I should say the lease that has shellfish on it. And then we add that together with the nitrogen removed at harvest, which is based on the nitrogen content in the individual shellfish, and then it's scaled based on the annual sales. Collectively, with this information, we can then determine the total annual nitrogen removal from a shellfish farm. With those data, the next step was then to figure out how much this nitrogen removal service is worth. This is work that's being led by Kelly Grogan. She's in the economics department in IFAS. Kelly and her team conducted 2 surveys. The first survey was to determine the supply side, which was the price per credit to enter into a market to grow shellfish just for water quality restoration. So this would be our shellfish producers. Then we also surveyed to figure out how much people were willing to pay for nitrogen removal credits, and this would be the demand side, or our wastewater treatment plants in our case. So the first part of our survey was that of the credit producers, so the shellfish farmers. So thank you to the 59 producers who responded to our survey. It was really helpful in giving context to this work. For the producer side, our question focused on what price would you need to be paid to grow shellfish just for nitrogen removal benefits. This helps us determine the price that the grower would be willing to sell their credits for. And then we asked this question about the different kinds of clams and oysters. And then we based this on the current price, so how much that individual shellfish goes for right now, how much more you would need to charge if you were just growing the shellfish in an area where there was never any sales allowed. This would be in that restoration aquaculture context. Sales sometimes allowed, sales always allowed, and then the number of responses are outlined here. I really just focus on this sales never allowed section, and you can see that there's anywhere from just a few cents to 18 cents as being the additional costs per organism per individual that would be needed if you were just to grow shellfish for nitrogen removal benefits. Our survey for the demand for credits went out to wastewater treatment plants. We surveyed 50 different wastewater treatment plant operators, which led to 55 different facilities being represented. 20 of those facilities were located in areas where there was a basin management action plan. These are water quality restoration plans for different watersheds. And 30 out of the 55 plants that we surveyed already have discharge permits, so they have restrictions on the amount of nitrogen that they can discharge into the waterway. Our questions for the wastewater treatment plant focused around what their anticipated cost would be to meet the state mandated nitrogen reduction criteria. The state is making all wastewater treatment plants upgrade their facilities to reduce the amount of nitrogen that they are discharging into waterways. We use this anticipated costs to determine their willingness to pay for nitrogen credits. And we found that the value of these credits ranged from 91 cents per kilogram to $10.19 per kilogram of nitrogen removal. So this nitrogen removal is a lot more than what the producers needed to enter into a trading credit agreement. Now that we had measurements of enhanced denitrification from Florida's shellfish aquaculture, as well as the nitrogen content in clams and oysters, we're able to figure out how much nitrogen an individual farm can remove per year. Let's just take this clam farm as an example. This farmer sold 250 individuals or clams last year, and this occurred at a 2-acre lease. With this information, we can use the average of what our results showed and figured out that the shellfish farm removed about 110 pounds of nitrogen from the coastal environment. And because we have measurements of how much wastewater treatment plants would be willing to pay, we can figure out what the potential payment for services this would result in. And that would be about $200. So we've created this as an online calculator where you can put in your own metrics about your farm or just to play around, and you can scan this QR code now to give it a try. Our work has demonstrated that we can calculate the nitrogen removal benefits of Florida's shellfish aquaculture industry and assign it a value. We now have those data to tell you how much nitrogen this farm is removing and how much it's worth to the state and the people who live in the state in terms of ecosystem services. But how is there a way to actually get paid for this value? That's where Tom Ankersen came in. He's taking a look at the legal side of nutrient trading credits and payments for services in Florida. So Florida already has a program to trade nutrient credits, Florida Water Quality Trading Program. And in Tom's analysis, he found that it does appear to work for bivalves. Like you could put bivalves into this system. But there have been very few trades. And those that have occurred were all in St. Johns County, and there hasn't been anything since 2013. So as Tom dug a little bit deeper, he realized that there were some limitations and challenges to actually getting Florida's shellfish into the water quality trading program. Some of it had to deal with the need for site-specific data and the large uncertainty and variability in the results that we were getting. He also found that there's just a lot of reporting that would need to go into documenting these and documentation into getting these credits. And in some of the work from Kelly's economic survey, that amount of reporting might become burdensome relative to the revenue gained. He also found that there were opportunities for a chance to modify some rule reform and just to clarify some of the requirements. And in doing that, it might pave the way for more use of this water quality trading program. Well, the results of Tom's work kind of said that the nutrient trading credits were not really going to be the best option for payments for ecosystem services for Florida, and that's also been found in other states. For example, Maryland has a nutrient trading credit program, and there have only been 2 trades. But Tom did dive deeper into policies in Florida and found some other options for potential payments for services. Those other options include stormwater utility fees, fertilizer fees, local sales tax initiatives, and then even like long-term subsidies that could exist as a way to pay growers for the nitrogen removal benefits that their farm's providing, really getting that payment for ecosystem services. Our study was really just an exploratory first step about how to pay shellfish farmers for the ecosystem services that they provide and the role that shellfish aquaculture has in water quality restoration in the state. We show that mechanisms exist in Florida for shellfish farmers to get paid for their services. It's just a matter of figuring out what that really looks like, how shellfish fit into what already exists in the state. And I think there's a lot more that needs to happen before we can actually have a payments for ecosystem services. But I'm really hopeful because the demand for credits is only likely to increase. Wastewater treatment plants are going to be concerned about their ability to meet regulatory requirements, and that might make them turn to credits. We also miss potential buyers in our survey, and so if there's more buyers out there, that's more opportunities. Our work does showcase that aquaculture is a best management practice for nitrogen removal in waterways and should be considered as such. Shellfish aquaculture removes nitrogen while also providing other benefits. And while there's uncertainties about what the payments for services would look like, they do provide a lot of benefits for us and for the environment. And there should be a way to compensate our shellfish farmers for this. Moving forward, I think it's really important that we test the Florida's water quality trading program and pilot that with shellfish to help identify real holes or opportunities. We also need to look beyond credits and consider fee-based programs for funding payments for services, as well as longer-term strategies. Because there is a lot of opportunity. Shellfish aquaculture removes nitrogen and provides a suite of other ecosystem services. These are things that I benefit from, that all of Floridians benefit from, and all of Florida's coastal waters benefit from. There should be a way to compensate shellfish farmers for these benefits. And I am really hopeful that there will be soon. I just don't know when that would be. I do think that it's clear shellfish are a real tool in our toolbox for restoring coastal ecosystems. They're not meant to replace existing management strategies, but with all the water quality concerns we have around the state, every little bit helps. So stay tuned. I think there's still a lot more to do and a lot more we can learn, but there is a lot of potential too. So thank you for your time, and my contact information is here. If you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you.